Morning, everybody. Welcome, welcome. We'll give a few moments for everyone to join in here. Hey, Todd.
Hey, Justin, how you doing?
Pretty good. How about yourself?
Well, did we start the event?
I believe so, yep.
Great. Shout out to Cameron, Justin, Arthur, Ryan, Yiwan. Hello, hello.
How's your week going so far?
So far, so good. Market looks like it's recovering. Things are well. It's been a busy week. There's been a lot going on, so we can talk about some of that stuff. Thanks everybody for coming. We took a week off, as some of you may know, and we had an offsite. We were in sunny Colorado in the Rocky Mountains. So we are back, and we are here to kind of bring you the latest on what's going on, what's happening with Subspace. And of course, first and foremost, we are here to answer your questions. So if anyone has any questions,
Looks like.
sorry, I jumped out of there. If anyone has any questions or has anything they would like to say, please go ahead and raise your hand, and we would love to hear from you. You can also post your questions in the chat for this, which I believe is open, right? Yep, the office hours chat is available. So if anyone would like to ask a question, please post it there, or you can raise your hand, and we'll go ahead and invite you up to the stage. So thank you all for coming. As everyone knows, we're kind of in between iterations of the test nets right now. So given that, we are just going to go ahead and zoom out a little bit this week. We thought we would share some of the more high level things that have to do with Subspace, about what the vision is. And of course, that is going to involve Justin. For anybody who's just joining, my name is Todd, and Justin is here with us as well. He's in the support forum all day, every day, answering your questions. So I'm sure most of you have heard from Justin. But Justin, before we get started, what's going on?
Yeah, I mean, on my end, like you mentioned, we just had the offsite, so just been recombobulating after traveling and everything and kind of getting back into the swing of things, and just kind of been trying to game plan for phase two. Making sure to get a lot of the feedback that we got from the community and the team over the first phase and just kind of start to implement some of that, continuing to iterate and streamline the process as best as we can.
Yeah, it seems like no matter where you are in the world right now, the market is affected and it is hot. At least for us here in the northern hemisphere, it's pretty much 100 degrees Fahrenheit at least, anywhere you go. So yeah, we've been dealing with that, but it is great to be back, Justin. I'm glad we were able to come. Welcome to everybody who's just joining. Again, please raise your hand if you have anything to say. As I just mentioned, we are in between iterations of the testnet. The last one has ended. We did post the results of the testnet. That's been posted, I believe, in the forum and in the Discord, right, Justin? It's in both places.
Yep.
Yep. So everybody can see the wallet addresses, the rewards that were paid, and the full results as we get back to work here. And we're thinking about the next iterations of the testnet. For those that haven't maybe listened before, as this testnet has just closed down in the last few weeks, we're looking to start the next one in the upcoming months. Or it could be weeks, but probably going to be a little longer than a month or so. And we're not giving an exact time, of course, because we don't know what it's going to be, because it all depends on the building and how much we can get accomplished. And Justin, I know there's been a lot of changes coming up to things like the firing experience and syncing and so forth. So do you maybe want to touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, so the development team has been working pretty nonstop and tirelessly on various improvements. One of the significant ones they've really been focusing on is syncing speeds. Obviously that was one of the major frustrations and pain points in the first phase was how long it took to sync. So that's one of the major areas that they're focusing on, really trying to get what we call the DSN, the Decentralized Storage Network, fully up to its ideal implementation standard. And then on the other side, also they've also been really working a lot on optimizing for hard drives comparatively to just SSDs. There was some technical issues as far as like the I/O speeds and things like that go for hard drives, which kind of resulted in a little bit more of a frustrating process for some hard drive users in that first phase compared to maybe if you used an SSD or something along those lines. Luckily, they've been making a lot of good progress. Obviously, if you want more details as far as our development progress goes, we do upload all of our development videos to our YouTube channel. You can look out for our DevSync videos, which will have a little bit more insight for you. But yeah, mostly really just trying to focus on that user experience has kind of been the developer's main focus so far, at least over these recent weeks. Really trying to make sure phase 2 is a nice, seamless experience for the farmers, obviously, because they're the most important ones as far as consensus goes.
Yeah, one of the things that we had been said we were looking for, Justin, when I finally got to meet Justin at this last offsite, which was the highlight for me. Justin and I have worked together for over a year now here at Subspace, and we never actually met. I had met most of the people on our business team except Justin. So, Justin, it was great to meet you. And one of the things that we talked about was this concept or the notion of distributed farming that will be coming up in the future. And you had mentioned about plot sizes of 100 gig to what we consider to be a full plot. Can you maybe explain that a little bit more so everybody else can hear that? Because I know that was new to me. That's something that you said is in the code, I believe, right?
Yeah, so there's basically a metric that's set as the ideal plot size, and that just is part of the equation that goes into factoring replication factor and things along those lines. So ultimately, 100 gigs. If you look in the folder when you're farming, if you do a 100 gigabyte plot, you will have one plot folder. If you do 200 gigabytes, you'll have two plot folders. So effectively, each quote plot will be 100 gigabytes, and it will just do repeatedly as you expand. And as far as distributed farming goes, that's one kind of stretch goal the developers are working on, is trying to kind of mitigate the nodes place in the farming equation as much as possible. So ideally down the road, we should be able to do multiple farmers on single nodes, and if possible, if we can pull it off, no nodes, and still being able to run a farmer down the line. Basically, instead of having to run two pieces of software, you can ideally run one, which obviously will save a little bit with overhead and things like that as we continue to make progress. But that's a little bit more of a stretch goal, so I wouldn't expect that immediately, but it is something to look forward to down the line.
Yeah, and you had also mentioned what you just said, that we potentially you would not need to run a node. You can just run a farmer, which I know is attractive to a lot of people. You can just install the desktop and you can run it on any computer, which is a huge benefit of Subspace. One of the things that we always talk about as one of our value propositions is you don't need anything to get started in Subspace. All you need is commodity hardware on any computer, and you can be up and running a farmer, and you can farm tokens. It's not like proof of stake where you have to have tokens to stake with someone in order to earn yield. It's not like a proof of work as a Bitcoin or an Ethereum where you need to go out and buy expensive hardware just to mine. It's something that you can set up on essentially any computer, and there are really no startup costs. You just download the software and run it. So that's been one of our big value propositions. And those are some of the things that we wanted to talk about. Since we're in between test nets, and we're in a time right now where, as we said, we're building, we thought we would kind of zoom out again a little bit and talk about Subspace and the kinds of things that we're working on and what's going on. Obviously, with the market being the way it is, it seems that projects are dropping like flies, as are exchanges. And as everyone knows, if you go back and you look us up, you'll see our previous press releases where last May we raised 4.5 million, and we just raised almost 33 million this year. So the company is very well capitalized. The project is well funded. We've got some great investors behind us, and we're in a really good position. We've been hiring like crazy. Our team currently is about 22 people. We are a fully worldwide team. We have people on just about every continent. Justin and myself are in North America, as is most of the business team, and most of the dev team is in Europe and Asia. But there is about 22 of us, plus a few more, and we are hiring. So if anyone is a developer, particularly on the substrate framework. If you are a Rust developer, if you have experience doing front-end development, we are looking for people in a lot of areas. So please go ahead and take a look at the job board on the Subspace website. You can also keep an eye there on the upcoming notices for the ambassador program. The applications just closed for that on July 15th. Diana, as everyone knows, is in charge of that. So she will be updating us on when the next one comes out. And of course, we're going to announce it here so you'll know. In the meantime, though, we are always looking for people to help. If you do videos, if you do memes, if you're a moderator, if you can translate, certainly reach out on the Discord. We're always looking for people who want to be involved and help on the back end. And of course, anyone who wants to run a node and farm, we're looking for those people also. So it looks like there's a question here about how many applications did we get for the ambassador program? And Justin, I'm not sure. I know Diana had talked about this. I think Diana might be here. I don't know if she can answer that question. Do you know off the top of your head, Justin, how many ambassador applications we received?
If I remember correctly, it was in the 700 plus range. I don't have the exact number, but I know it was definitely a pretty significant amount of applicants that we saw.
I see we do have some of the team who's listening. So if anybody happens to know the answer to that, you could post it. That would be great. If not, we will shoot a note to Diana and let you know. But yeah, we did get a lot of applications. And of course, we're looking for a good, there's Diana, 1,600 plus applications, which is wonderful. And how many will we select is the next question. It looks like Diana has this conversation under control, so we'll leave that to her. And that is a huge number, Daniel Moon. Yes, and we are thrilled. Believe me, we've gotten some great candidates from all over the world, and we are trying to keep a good dispersion in different areas. So we have different language coverage and time zones and so forth. So thank you to everyone who applied, and please keep your eyes on the website to see when the next one will be coming. Another question that we've gotten quite a bit is in regards to a potential token sale. So we just wanted to talk about that again at a very high level, as we have not announced any explicit plans for when token sales will take place. We had announced previously that there were two separate kind of sales that we were looking at. One would be a community sale, and that would be for the people who have participated in the Aries and Gemini test nets. Of course, we recorded all the wallet addresses, and if you farmed at least one block, you would potentially be eligible if we do a community token sale in the future. So that would be a little bit of a smaller sale to a more private group. And then, of course, the potential that we may do a public sale. To say when these would happen it would be futile to try to predict right now. We're really just focused on these test nets. So if you're looking for information on the token sale, the best information we can give you is to just please stay tuned, and we'll have more about that. The market has, I wouldn't say, really given us pause. It's really had us take that stance that we want to drop back and build. We really want to work on protocol development right now and deciding what we can get into the protocol before we launch, and making those trade-offs over getting it out and getting it out complete, which is, of course, the highest priority and what's going to be the best for the community. Launching into a market like this obviously presents its own challenges, but it also gives the opportunity for some real price discovery, which is positive. You don't launch into this swell when prices are running up and then you get hit on the other side. And we know that the people that are here are the ones that are really interested in the project. And again, we appreciate that, and we thank you for coming. So anyway, Justin, zooming out, some of the things we wanted to talk about this week were in regards to the different experiences, the experiences of the developer, the user, potentially integrations, and things like that. And one of the things that you and I talked about were the potential for DApps on Subspace. One of the most general questions that we seem to get is, well, what is Subspace going to do? You know, you back up at these blockchains, where's the value in that? What types of things kind of fit on Subspace? So Justin, I'm going to put that to you. And also, there was a hackathon a few months back where you developed a product along with another team member that actually was a DApp for Subspace. Do you maybe just want to color us in a little bit on that?
Yeah, so obviously, dApps on Subspace is a pretty broad subject. But in general, we believe that Subspace is one of the truly scalable infrastructure layers that can be used for dApps. And we mean that ultimately in, obviously horizontal and vertically scaling as far as like transactions per second and everything, but then also on interoperability. So as Todd mentioned, the hackathon that we did a few months ago, it was actually an Ethereum hackathon. And what we had made was what we called Meta Vault, not an official name, but it's just the temporary name. Effectively, it was a dApp on Ethereum that would allow you to then load up an NFT that you may have on the Ethereum blockchain, and then back that up into the Subspace network storage. The metadata itself, in particular, is what we were focusing in this case. And the reason this may be important is, most people don't realize that, sure, while your NFT is on chain, oftentimes the metadata, meaning, the actual image file that may be associated, or any other kind of important data that you would want with that non-fungible token, is actually not on chain, and oftentimes stored in, somewhere like AWS, or if it is on chain, it's on IPFS, where the user will have to, or the creator rather, will have to continue to pay storage fees and maintenance fees. Ultimately meaning, if that, let's say, if the creator of X project goes under, you could find yourself in a position where all of a sudden your $250,000 NFT is just a 404 error with no image loading, which would obviously be very frustrating. So that was one of the very quick, offhanded hackathon projects that we made, which was Meta Vault, which allowed you to back up that metadata on chain permanently at low cost. And then obviously give you a little bit of peace of mind knowing that your investment's a little bit more secure. Expanding that out a little bit further, we could make that project a little bit more all-inclusive to maybe include multiple chains. You could maybe even include some kind of NFT transfer protocol from one chain to another. These are all just examples of some of the things that could be done once you have truly scalable execution and truly scalable permanent storage on a network. Because without that storage side, it's really only one half of the equation if you really are looking at the broad picture of computing and application development.
Yeah, and from a scalability perspective, one of the really big problems, as everyone has heard, that Ethereum is facing right now is scalability. To put a meg of data on Ethereum is tens of thousands of dollars. So to get the permanence and the decentralization, it's quite expensive because it's just not built to scale. And of course, to us, that scalability of adding additional nodes and the other activity doesn't congest the network. That actually becomes an asset because it's adding disk space, it's adding storage, it's actually bringing down the cost of storage. And as Justin mentioned, with the replication that goes on from the protocol, there is a lot of it's perpetual. It will continue to exist. So that's one of the huge things that we talk about a lot. It looks like we do have a few questions out here, Justin. So I'm going to start with, looks like Contextual, who said, I have ran a DevNet and farmed a lot of TSSC during the stress test and saved all the addresses. Am I okay to qualify for stress test rewards in this case? Justin, I believe the answer to that is yes, but do you want to go ahead and answer that one more specifically?
Yeah, so we had our stress test, that's what we call it. It was kind of the ending stage of our Aries testnet. That was the stage right before our incentivized testnet. We had mentioned a quote early adopter award for those users. That reward, think of that more of like a token of appreciation. I wouldn't expect any kind of token allocation, but maybe something more along the lines of like a POAP or just kind of that badge of, hey, I've been here since the beginning kind of certificate. So that's kind of what we're thinking as far as that specific reward goes. To be eligible for that, you had to farm on the Aries testnet at least one block, and then you had to farm at least one block on the Gemini Phase 1. Assuming both of those are done, and assuming you haven't lost your seed phrase for those wallets, then yes, you should be all set to go for the early adopter reward. Just once again, make sure to keep access to that wallet because it is going to automatically be airdropped to whichever address was used. I would hate to see anybody lose access to that because I think we've all
Yeah, we had talked a little bit about that previously and what we might do. And while now we're saying, as Justin mentioned, it could be something along the lines of a POAP or perhaps an NFT or something like that. It may not have anything immediate, but you never know. As everyone knows, people are constantly going back and rewarding people that were early adapters, which certainly anyone who's listening to this is. And we appreciate that. So you never know. There is going to come a time when Subspace is going to leave our company, which is Subspace Labs, and it will be run by a foundation. And that foundation will have its own management, and the community, who is, as we had mentioned in past broadcasts, is going to own 51% plus of the token supply of Subspace, is ultimately going to dictate the future of the protocol. So you never know. So hold on to those NFTs or anything like that that may come along, and we will certainly have more information about that as we move forward. But Justin, getting back a little bit to the developer experience and things like integration with other chains, you had mentioned interoperability, bridging, things of that nature. And when you and I got a chance to talk last week when we met, you have a lot of thoughts on this. And every time I felt like I sat down with you, I learned a little something else, as I do every week when we speak here. So what are your thoughts about the future when it, as it pertains to interoperability with other chains and bridging and so forth, and the types of things that are possible with Subspace?
Yeah. Just to start, I think interoperability is really going to be the only thing that drives true crypto adoption, throughout the masses. If you think back to the internet days, it wasn't one technology that won. We combined multiple different technologies on top of each other to make what we all know and love as the internet. And I think we're going to see something similar with crypto, and just general Web3. And what that puts us as Subspace, is we luckily and on purposely have designed ourselves to be as interoperable as possible. To start, we're built on Substrate, which is a project developed by Parity, who creates Polkadot and Kusama, and they developed Substrate from the start with a very modular, I guess, perspective. So you see modular blockchain starting to go around a little bit now as a common term, but Substrate itself, it really is developed from a place to allow for that kind of style of development. And what that can mean, obviously, once we really start to integrate with other chains, we can really start to see some of the exciting opportunities this might bring, across multi-chain swaps. A truly decentralized DEX, for example, could be built on top of Subspace. That would actually be genuinely cross-chain. Same thing with, like I mentioned earlier, with NFT bridges. You could maybe conceptually make something along those lines where you try and find a way to swap your crypto dude from Ethereum to Polkadot, for example. All of these things are things that require cheap storage and execution, not just execution, which is something that is oftentimes the one side of the equation that's taken care of. As far as long term goes, it's going to be the key that allows all of these ecosystems to connect. And one of those, they will have to be connected over some platform. And it's our positioning that Subspace is probably the best position to do that. Kind of ties into a question that we were asked by Junior Washburn in the chat is, what's the best way to learn about what it would take to add other non-dot blockchains to store blocks on Subspace? And ultimately, that's a multi-sided question. The biggest thing is going to be being familiar with Substrate and how it functions. But ultimately, it's going to have to be an intimate understanding of both sides of the equation. Luckily, Subspace will start. We will be bankrolling and kind of initiating a lot of those integrations, as we've already seen with Dot, and here in the near future, hopefully Ethereum and some of the other major networks. But once we really start to see all these connections come together, you'll start to see the true power of interoperability. Kind of similar to how Ethereum's true value proposition wasn't really seen until the layer 2 started taking off. Kind of similar to an interoperability perspective. Just having the one connected, it's hard to see that value. But once you start to see multiple and can start to really make some swaps and have some fun interactions, that's when it starts to really open up your eyes a little bit.
Yeah, that's well said, Justin. I want to hop back to that in one second, but it looks like Roman Zrak has a question. So, Roman Zrak, I'm going to invite you to the stage. If you can go ahead and accept, you will be able to come up and speak. It looked like somebody else had their hand up for a moment there, but they disappeared. So, if anyone else would like to speak, go ahead. Roman Zrak, we'll go ahead and wait for you to accept that invitation to come to the stage. But yeah, Justin, along the lines of what you were just saying, yeah, another question that we get quite a bit is, are we going to run on a parachain on Polkadot or Kusama? And what's really important to understand about Subspace is it is a layer one. It sits all the way at the bottom. It sits more alongside Polkadot. It does not sit on top of it. It has a lot of the same features and capabilities. Of course, Polkadot has the parachains, it has relay chain, it uses a nominator validator proof of stake model, which is quite different than what we're doing with proof of archival storage. It's a very different consensus module. And of course, with ours, as everyone knows, the storage actually takes place on the farmers, but it is a layer one. It does run right alongside of it. So what we have in common with Subspace and Kusama, sorry, with Polkadot and Kusama, why we frequently get compared to them is because we both developed on the substrate framework. But outside of that, they are really completely independent, and they do offer a lot of the same functions. So then, Justin, going back along those lines, still waiting for Roman Zrak. If you want to go ahead and accept that invitation to speak, you can come up. Otherwise, I'll keep talking to Justin because he is a wealth of information. Um, One of the questions I also saw pop up, Justin, and you were just talking about J.R. Washburn, and if you want to add other non-dot blockchains to store blocks on Subspace, and why we think that's valuable. You talked about the NFT proposition, but how about things like reporting, or if a blockchain goes down, if data gets lost, or something like that? You had some really good thoughts on that when we spoke, and I was hoping you could share that.
Yeah. So this is something that I think is kind of so the core of my thought process is along these lines. We're often asked, well, why do we need to back up Polkadot, or why do we need to back up Xchain or re-verify or anything along these lines? And it really stems back to something that's a very core premise of just crypto and cryptography in general, of don't trust, verify. Ultimately what we've built in this space in Web3 is trustless environments. There's no way to, you don't just, oh yeah, I trust that you're sending me this Bitcoin. No, you verify it. That's what mining is and everything. So along those same lines, you kind of have to have the same thought process with a global crypto project. Imagine if there was a 51% attack that was occurred on X, let's say Polkadot for the sake of example. How do we get back that data? How do we re-verify, exactly where that 51% attack occurred, and how do we ensure that the right people are put back into positions that they should have been? Ultimately, you will need some kind of backup of the authentic Polkadot chain prior to that 51% attack occurring. Otherwise, you'd have no way of knowing. Ultimately, once you're able to change the history of a blockchain effectively, you do now control history. So that's where, it's an important source to have some kind of backup at the very least, whether it be, an offline or an archival node, for example, that many other projects run. But in our case, it can be a whole nother network that has a completely separate consensus layer, still completely verifiable and secure. It could potentially be a pretty large implication if something like this were to occur down the lines. And furthermore, obviously, let's take away the whole attacking side of it. If just the network were to go down, once it comes back online, how do we know that that's truly the right network? We'd have to refine consensus and everything like this, and it could be quite the pain process if it was something at a very large scale. And that's where, decentralized services like Subspace can come into play. Because, relying on some back to AWS server or something to hold these archives strictly isn't reliable from a decentralized platform. But it's also hard to trust as well, because who uploaded that backup? How did they get there? X, Y, and Z. Versus having another consensus layer that's actually verifying this data as it's coming in. Could definitely be a good point of reference should any blockchain need to make adjustments or have any kind of external insight into their chain's history. Could
That's
even, I was just going to say real quick, you could even expand that a step further, and if you think about companies like Chain Analysis, for example, or some of these data companies that are starting to try and really look at what's going on chain, they have to run a node for every network they want to participate in. So Ethereum, Bitcoin, Cardano, Algorand, the list goes on and on. So we could also potentially kind of help them, or services like them that need to pull various chains at the same time. They could also utilize something like Subspace to very mitigate their, infrastructure costs and overall headache as far as that goes within their configuration.
Yeah, back to what I said before, storage and scalability really go from a liability, as you see in a lot of cases, to an asset. And that's exactly what you're talking about and how we can make that data available. I see that we're getting toward the end, but I see Alphanomicon would like to say something. Alphanomicon is one of our lead ambassadors. I've invited you to the stage. Alpha, how are you?
Good morning. How are you guys doing?
Doing great.
Good. Yeah, so actually Justin just railroaded my question, but I did have a second question. The question I was going to ask was how does Subspace help decongest or de-stress other networks? And he answered that at the very end right there. So thank you for that. And then the second question I had is, since Subspace is going to be touted as like a layer one, or I would even consider it a layer zero, as I mentioned before, because it's working in the background, helping other blockchains that are layer ones, but it's also doing layer one things. Are you able to talk about what your goal or thoughts on smart contracts on the platform will be?
Yeah, so a lot of the smart contract stuff is still being worked out with the development team. But ultimately, obviously, we will support smart contracts, and that's where kind of our decoupled execution comes in. So we have farmers on our network who strictly do consensus and obviously provide storage for the network as well. We have another layer of our network called the Executor Chain, and executors are the ones who are actually processing the computation and the actual transactions themselves. So they'll be the ones who are kind of running the computation on your smart contracts and complex transactions and things like that. So luckily, with them being completely decoupled from the consensus layer, you should see a lower cost of computation as well. For example, like that's part of the reason why gas is so high on Ethereum, because you're not just paying for the computation side, you're paying for the storage, the factoring the consensus, and it's all bundled together so that they're kind of all reliant on each other. With them being decoupled like that, computation is a little bit more free to spread its wings as it likes, and it's not necessarily paired to that consensus layer, which kind of frees up some exciting things as well.
Yeah, in Ethereum, they're actually talking about truncating the chain as a possible evolution as they start to look into this dank sharding and some of the new architectures that they're checking out and putting it on something like the graph just so they can store the history. The data access layer is very important. Justin, we had some other stuff we were going to talk about. We're going to get into like data access and how staking may work on Subspace, but I think we'll have to hold that till next week, given that we're up against the time. I don't think we have any additional questions, but Justin, do you have any closing thoughts for anyone?
No, I think we've kind of covered everything. Like you mentioned, come in next week if we want to talk about some of the other things we had planned, such as staking and some of those exciting things. But overall, thank you everybody for all of your support. I know it has been a little bit of a quiet lull period as the developers have been working hard, but we've definitely been continuing to keep our nose to the grindstone and try and deliver what we can for you. Look forward to talking to everybody next week, and have a good rest of your day.
Thank you, everybody. And JR, I do see the post that you put out there. And yes, I would love to speak to you about that. There's actually somebody named AJ who I reached out to. Mina did a whole podcast about exactly what you're saying about how they don't store the data on chain. And this is a problem that they were looking to solve. So I actually have reached out to them. I would love to ping you about that, and we can talk offline. So thank you again, everyone, for coming, and we will see you next week here at the same time. Keep the questions coming. If you have an idea for something you would like to hear us talk about, please go ahead and post it in the regular chat, and we'll see everybody next week.
Good day, everybody. Have a good one, Todd.